Hello everyone and welcome back to Expecto Podcastium. We are your hosts. My name is Jess.
I'm Erica.
I'm Mega.
And I'm Headcanons and More.
So today we will be discussing chapters 16 and 17 of Philosopher's Stone. Chapter 16 is titled Through the Trapdoor. So one thing that I have to say about this chapter is that it was a very exciting chapter compared to some of the other previous ones where they were like a little bit boring. This one was kind of full of excitement and it really like intrigued me the whole way. Like from the very first word, I was very intrigued and I just wanted to read more and more. Was I the only one who felt that way, or did you guys feel that way as well?
Yeah, it's like, I think in the very beginning I started off with like this. Harry was very stressed throughout exams, and like Voldemort was like hanging over his head, and like it was very much this sense of anticipation for everybody coming in. So I was like gripping the page, it's like reading quickly. Yeah.
This chapter, I really like it because I love the interactions that happen between Harry, Hermione, and Ron. I love the like I know they're already friends, but this chapter is just like I really love the whole teamwork aspect that happens. From them going through all the enchantments and the spells and stuff. I like how J.K. Rowling wrote each of them getting past something and it's one of their strengths. So it's like they showed each of their strengths is a way to get through. And I really liked that part. I think that was really, really smart. And another thing, I just want to quote here. We have our first caps lock Harry. Basically, Harry is talking about how he has to go out tonight and try and get the stone first. And then Ron says, "You're mad." And then Hermione says, "You can't. After what McGonagall and Snape have said, you'll be expelled." And Harry's like, "So what?" This is the part that I love here. "Don't you understand? If Snape gets hold of the stone, Voldemort's coming back. Haven't you heard what it was like when he was trying to take over? There won't be any Hogwarts to get expelled from. He'll flatten it out, or turn it into a school for the dark arts. Losing points doesn't matter anymore, can't you see? Do you think he'll leave you and your families alone if Gryffindor wins the House Cup? If I get caught before I can get to the stone, well, I'll have to go back to the Dursleys and wait for Voldemort to find me there. It's only dying a bit later than I would have done because I'm never going over to the dark side. I'm going through the trapdoor tonight and nothing you two say is going to stop me. Voldemort killed my parents, remember?" And then it just says he glared at them. "You're right, Harry," said Hermione in a small voice. It's just that entire, I know that was a long quote, but when I read that, I was just, it's Harry's major first time of just like freaking out at them. Like he does that a number of times, but it showed how like stressed Harry was. So I just wanted to quote that because it was a significant thing and he just kind of let it all out there, which I liked because it's just Harry just doesn't care. He's like, "I don't care. I have to do this,"
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's especially important in regards to something that we talked about last episode. The fact that like Harry in this book is pretty shy and reserved, when Ron and Hermione are really the ones who are outspoken and like speak up a lot. So this outburst is especially gripping and important and like catches their attention because this is Harry, the reserved, quiet one, and he's yelling at them. And it also for readers kind of puts things to perspective that like we've had this fantastical, amazing, lovely book, and then but at the end of the day there is this horrible evil hanging over their heads, and it's kind of like it's dangerous, and Voldemort is willing to do horrible things if he wins. And there is this very high stakes thing that these little 11-year-olds are the only ones standing in the way of. Or they think they're the only ones staying in the way of, at least.
I also think it's quite interesting that after Harry does have this outburst, Hermione goes very quiet, and then Ron says, "But will it cover all three of us?" And Harry goes, "Oh, all three of us." And Ron goes, "Oh, come off it! You don't think we let you go alone?" It's just like, yeah. It's. I think it's quite. It shows what Ron and Hermione, but especially Ron, are like. They're very much kind of, "Oh no, we're going with you. Okay, don't think you're going on your own. We're going with you." I just really like that. I think it's very, very sort of indicative of them as characters.
It reminded me of the end of Half-Blood Prince when Ron was just like, "We're going with you. That's not an option. You should know by now that we're with you till the end." It reminded me of, Ron's character grows so much, but he has these core things that stick with him. Even if some of these things get a little mixed up throughout the books, he has these main things of his core things that define him.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, and I guess those of you who are just joining us will find out very soon that we all love Ron Weasley with like a great passion. Those of you who have been with us from the beginning already know. I love him so much. And then, like, kind of skipping a little bit ahead, this is like one of the lines that Ron says that makes me laugh out loud, like just so much. When they're all under the cloak, they're like all like they're sneaking around the castle, and wait, where is it now? Oh, yeah, so they're snooping around the castle, and they've just like passed Neville, which we'll get back to in a moment. But they run into Mrs. Norris, and Ron's line is like, "Oh, let's kick her just this once." It's just so. I mean, I do not. Let me just say, I do not condone animal cruelty, but like, can we just all agree that Mrs. Norris was like a devil cat? Like, and like it just made me laugh so hard because he's just so over it. He hates that cat so much.
Another thing about that part that made me laugh was Harry impersonating the Bloody Baron to scare away Peeves. I can just imagine in my head, like when I imagine the three of them in my head, I don't necessarily imagine like the movie actors. I imagine variations of fan art and mixed with some parts from the movie actors, but I just imagine them in my head doing that. They should have put Peeves in there. That was such a mistake not having Peeves in there. That would have added so much comedy. Yeah.
They did actually cast Peeves in the first film, but they cut him out in the final edit.
That makes it even worse.
We'll talk about that next episode. There's a lot of things that happen there. Another thing I want to ask you, HM, because I've never heard of this. What on earth is a snuff box? Is it a British thing?
Yes, it is. It's from the old imperialist days. Snuff used to be a thing that people would. I'm not making this up. People would put it up their nose so that they'd sneeze and sort of clear out their nostrils. So a snuff box would be like it's like a powder stuff, and you put it on like in a handkerchief or something, sniff it up, and then you sneeze, and your nostrils would be cleared. But it is honestly something that upper class people in Britain used to do because the rich are stupid and idiotic and waste the money on frivolous rubbish. Yeah. I'm a socialist, in case you can tell. I'm very left wing.
Throwing shade there. Then why on earth would McGonagall have them make a pretty snuff box? That was so weird. You Brits have all this random shit that's just like, why does this exist?
That's our shtick.
Oh. I like the part when they go see Hagrid and Hagrid basically tells them everything and he's just like, oh, I should not have said that. He's the one to go to when you want to know stuff because I feel like Hagrid has ADHD in my head because like with regards to filtering himself because I have ADHD and one of the main struggles that I have with my ADHD is filtering things that I say, especially in like situations when I'm like not with my friends and have to be cautious and not say inappropriate things. But Hagrid saying that just made me laugh. Another part that I loved was when the three of them split up to go, and they wanted each of them to cover an area to watch out for where the teachers are. And Hermione goes to the staff room, and then Ron says, just, if anyone catches you, just say you're waiting for Professor Flitwick for help on asking for your marks. And I just love how Ron automatically did that.
I think he says, he put on a high voice, "Hey, Professor Flitwick, I'm so worried. I think I got question 14B wrong." I was just like, "Oh, shut up!"
But it was
really funny.
It was also like my Hermione shipper brain. This is how I interpreted it. Was like Hermione was worried about doing that, so he tried to figure out a way to make her calm down. I know that that's probably not how it was interpreted or meant to be written, but that's what my Hermione brain does. Is it takes every interaction between the two of them, figures out a way to make it a flirty thing. Seriously,
I do that too as well.
I'm not even kidding. When I was reading the books for the first time, every time they would interact, I'd be like, "Oh, what's gonna happen?"
Yeah, I have to say, shame Erica. I think that one's like a little bit of a reach.
Yeah.
But I understand, and I'm like with you on it still.
I didn't really notice the first time I read the book, but when I was reading it for this episode, I noticed that after Harry's outburst and Ron stepping up to be like, "Of course, we're coming with you," one of Harry's protests was that if we get caught, I might get expelled, and I'm gonna be in trouble anyway, but you guys might get expelled too. I thought it really interesting that Hermione, her response to that was that they're not gonna expel me because I got a really, really good grade on an exam. That just sounded really odd to me.
Yeah.
It made me want to like almost like hug her and be like, "Oh, you naive little child. Why do you think
So
that?"
by the end of this, it gets really dark, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was very cute.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we can. This is kind of a chapter where Ron does shine a lot, and I love that so much. I mean, he just takes the lead, and first of all, he's like to Hermione, he's like, "Have you gone mad? Are you a witch or what?" And like, it's like just he's so like with it, like he's so clever, and people just don't realize it.
With what you said about the devil's snare, one thing that I like about that was it already shows kind of one of Ron's biggest strengths is how strategic he is, and he's really good at those last minute, holy crap, what are we gonna do decisions, where like Hermione's good at like planning things out and getting everything there, but she freaks out in the last minute when things go wrong. Not always, but it changes and she gets better at it. But this moment was that first sign of like Ron's like, "Hey, remember this? We got to do this. Stop freaking out. Do it. Are you a witch or not?" Oh my god. I'm not talking about the movies, but I will definitely go into rant mode when we get to that.
Oh yeah, that was gonna be fun. But yeah, I really appreciated I appreciated like all three of their characters and how well they worked together. Like you said, Hermione was very good at like thinking of the plans. Like she was sitting there and like reading through her textbooks beforehand, trying to think of any of the enchantments she had. Harry's really the one that like pushed them to doing this. But then Ron is kind of there as like this almost subtle like support character, like there whenever either of them need like a push. He's there to like push them whenever they need. Whether it's like making jokes at like Miss Norris and like getting rid of the tenseness, or like you said, yelling at Hermione to snap her out of panic mode and going, or like being there for Harry and being like, "Of course we're gonna support you." He's always there in like that subtle way of like bolstering them up when they need it, then like stepping back when they've got it, which I think is such an underrated but such an important skill to have.
I think it does kind of show in these, especially in the first three books, although obviously in this we're just focusing on this, that Ron's definitely, he's the emotional support of the trio. He is the one, putting in that day-to-day kind of work of kind of keeping his friends happy as best he can and calm and all the rest of it, and just being a really decent person. Like, you get the sense Ron's just a really sweet, kind person in this book. He's a really good friend. He's that guide into the world that Harry needs, and he's that sort of personable person who Hermione and Harry can kind of get along with and enable them to be more confident and all the rest of it. So yeah, he's the best.
I wouldn't say the word supportive, because, like, basically I think we all agree that Harry and Ron are uncomfortable around emotions until, like, Order of the Phoenix. To a certain degree, whenever Hermione would burst into tears, they'd be like, "What are you doing? Stop it," or something like that. But I definitely know what you mean there.
I think we can go into more details later, but I think there is a slight difference between them not knowing how to react when someone suddenly bursts into tears and, like, just being empathetic and reading someone's emotions.
Yeah, that's what I meant there.
Yeah.
I also really like the teamwork that happens when they're trying to get the key. Of, like, the key that they're trying to find keeps going away from them. So Harry's like, "Okay, Ron, you go there. Hermione, you go there." And then he, like I said before, the whole teamwork and the way they all interact with each other in this chapter is really, I really love it. I think, honestly, I'm thinking this might be my favorite chapter.
In this book? Or?
In this book, yeah.
Okay.
Series. Oh my god, if you asked me in the series, I wouldn't be able to choose. There's too many. And they're all from Order of the Phoenix and Deathly Hallows.
I completely agree with you, Erica. It is also my favorite chapter because it also really shows, like we were saying, it shows each character for who they are. I mean, we're talking about what an amazing, I know you don't like the word supportive, but whatever, an amazing,
I like the word supportive. I feel like I totally worded myself wrong when I said that. I kind of was thinking that HM meant, like, he's, like, the one they go to talk about their feelings with, because that's not true, because Harry and Ron are not that good at sharing their feelings yet, which most 11-year-old boys are. It's the truth. But I just wanted to clarify that. Continue, Jeff.
no problem. I mean, no, it's good. So, we just see what an incredible, and loyal friend Ron is. And then we also see, again, how Hermione is, this very logical, very smart, very clever character who's also, just as supportive. And then we see Harry, who's really, like you were saying, when he was directing everyone to get the keys, we see him coming into his leadership role.
Totally. I was going to say these last two chapters is where I said in the last episode that we're still kind of figuring out Harry's personality, and I feel like this chapter starts to officially show his personality. And then, of course, there's our knight, the chess game. I just love that statement. I'm going to be a knight. Oh, I love that man so much. Just this brave guy. This is the first time that Ron offers up his life. Like, I know he probably wouldn't die, but he'd probably think, like, it doesn't matter. Harry will get through. We'll do this. That's what's probably in his head. So it just shows how loyal he is and how much he cares more about his friends than for himself, because he knows that his friends can do it. And I love that part.
I think it also shows Ron sort of not just his own selflessness, but also the way he knows how capable his friends are. He's like, yeah, they could do this. I'm going to do my thing, and they can do this. I've got complete confidence in them, and all the rest of it. And it does, like you say, it just shows you how much of a good friend he is, and how much of a selfless person he is, because he has a healthy enough ego to go, no, it's okay, I can do this. Everyone else can, they can do it. That's absolutely great. So I'm just going to focus on what I can do. I think that as an 11-year-old, I can imagine that's probably quite a good trait to have. like, as a person in general, that's a good trait to have. But I think as an 11-year-old, and at this point Ron isn't quite as insecure as he gets later on, he's still got that kind of sense of he knows how good he is at stuff. But actually, this is quite sweet. He actually sort of apologizes for being good at chess. He says, "Now, don't be offended or anything, but neither of you are that good at chess." It's just like, oh, Rod, stop being modest, okay? This is fine. You don't have to worry about upsetting everyone's feelings. You know, you're going to save the day. I just thought that was really nice.
Not really to do with the podcast, but I just want to add in that here, the very iconic scene where he was like, "And me, I'll be a knight," or whatever. This is also kind of where I get my Tumblr name from. My Tumblr name is Knight and Books, and so I wanted to be like a subtle meaning towards like Ron and Hermione, and so obviously the knight meaning Ron, and then I kind of, after misreading fic by Diva Gonzo, I kind of became obsessed with the fact that one of like the nicknames for Hermione that Ron has is Books. And so he'll often just call her Books, which I think is really cute. And so I just kind of made that my Tumblr name, that it was like just Knight and Books, like Ron and Hermione. And I don't know, that's just how the Knight part of it came about.
In a few of my fan fictions, Ron always calls Hermione his little bookworm. I always love that. But we should also talk about Hermione. I love how Hermione's just like, Harry's reading this. He's like, "What on earth is this talking about?" And Hermione's like, "Oh, it's simple. This is, of course." And then she just smells everything and she's like, "Oh, this one and this one." And Harry's just like, "How did she do that?" I love that part so much because it shows Hermione's strengths of just like knowing. She knows that she's good at things and she feels confident in her decisions of certain things. Like, not, she doesn't feel confident about everything she does, but this kind of thing, she knows that she feels confident and Harry trusts her. So I like that whole interaction between the two of them there.
Yeah. I love the trust that all of them have in this point. Like, I guess they haven't really they've known each other for a year, but they trust each other with all of this, with Hermione and Harry trusting Ron to lead them the chess thing, with Harry just accepting Hermione's answer to the riddle, like no questions asked, just like, okay, great, thanks for solving it. I also really love the fact that, well, Hermione loved this too. Hermione commented on this, that this last test, this Snape's test, was a logic puzzle. It wasn't magic at all. And Hermione has a really good point that, like, a lot of the greatest wizards haven't got an ounce of logic. They'll be stuck in here forever. I think when I was younger, that really, because I know so many books where they kind of ignore common sense and throw themselves completely into like the magic world and stuff. But Harry Potter, from the very beginning, has been aware of like the fact that wizards have flaws too. Just because you have a wand doesn't mean you're like an amazing, you're like perfect in everything, you know, like you still have flaws, and logic is a very big one. And it seems so like perfect that Snape is the one to make a logic puzzle. Snape, the one who has who came from like a half-blood family and like was always very aware of like muggles and stuff because of Lily. And I really like that. It gives a little bit more of a eye into Snape's character, even in the first book.
I also think it's going back to the logic puzzle with Hermione. When I was reading this, I was about sort of 14, 15 years old, and I'm autistic, and I kind of related quite a lot to Hermione in this situation because, like her, I'm quite good at this kind of, well, not massively good, but in a controlled environment, knowing what you can and can't do, that's something that Hermione's really good at, and I kind of related to that at that age. Even though Ron's still my favourite character, at this point in time of the books, I could say, you know, I like both these characters. They both kind of remind me of parts of myself. And it was quite interesting to kind of see that, you know, that can be a positive thing. You know, you don't always have to worry about, oh, what stuff's going on around me. You can just focus on what you need to do and do things like that. And I thought that was quite a good little scene. It is kind of. I do find it quite funny actually when Hermione just hugs Harry and his immediate thought is, "Oh God, no." I thought that was quite funny because it's like Harry's like, "Oh no, emotion, no, this is no, definitely not. Get away from me." I thought that was quite funny, and it's. I mean, as an 11-year-old, getting hugged by a girl is sort of terrifying. I mean, obviously it's a little bit different with Ron and Hermione because Ron's kind of like, "Oh, okay, I kind of like this," and Harry's just like, "Ew, no, let me never do this again. I hate this. Where's Ron?" kind of thing. But
Is that
yeah,
really how it worked for 11-year-old boys? When they get hugged, they're like, "Get away." That actually
well, for me it is, but then again, I'm not exactly normal, so there we go.
normal.
There's the whole thing of like cooties, right? Cooties is a big thing when you're
We
younger.
don't
Everyone's
really
like,
have
"Don't touch,
those.
don't touch."
Okay.
Normal is overrated. I don't like normal people. Not that I don't like normal people. It's just more. I find myself being friends with the weird people, and I like the weird people because it's like we can be weird and not worry about having to be cool. And I was never cool, and cool people were mean to me. So I feel like a lot of Potterheads are kind of a bit of the misfits.
Mm.
I feel like it's a common trait with Potterheads, at least from what I've noticed through the friends that I've made in the Harry Potter community. So
Getting a little philosophical, but I feel like normal isn't really a thing. Because what I've noticed is that every single person I know, like once you get to know them a little bit better, everybody has little weird quirks. And I think that's also true. And like going back to Harry Potter, I think every single character in Harry Potter has at least a little bit of a weird quirk. And the more we get to know all the characters, the more we understand they're not really like normal, whatever normal means.
I mean, being a witch or wizard isn't necessarily a normal common thing.
In the wizarding world, it is.
The thing that comes into my head right now is just like I feel like Voldemort's not normal people as being a sociopathic, insane, murdering, crazy dude. That just came into my head when you said that.
I also going back slightly to when they meet Neville in the common room, and Hermione does the body charm on him. I do think that was kind of an interesting insight into kind of when Hermione's back's against the wall, she does kind of she goes full on, and it's an interesting insight because you don't think about it too much at the time, but then after rereading the later books, you start to think, oh yeah, that's where that started to come from, and it's kind of an insight into Hermione's character in that she does what she thinks is needed to be done at the time, even though it might be considered, a little bit, well, not dodgy, but sort of slightly morally grey, I suppose is probably the best way to phrase it. But I think that's a whole different issue. But in this particular moment, it's a good insight into kind of that she's capable and she's got the magical talent and all the rest of it, and in this situation it's not exactly necessary, but it's what she decides to do. I just thought that was quite an interesting little kind of insight into Hermione's character.
I also think I'm curious what you guys think. Do you think from then on Neville was a little bit scared of Hermione?
I've always been very, especially once I started getting into fan fiction, I've always been really fascinated by how the rest of the Gryffindors and the rest of the people in the school think of the trio, because you don't really see any of that. And honestly, I feel like it would make a lot of sense for Neville to be a little frightened of Hermione after this. We don't really, I guess we don't see it as much, but also I'm thinking back and I can't really think of any times when Neville and Hermione interacted one on one. That's a really interesting point. I like that. Not for Neville. I don't want to. Poor Neville, but.
I think it could be the case that Neville does actually sort of is a little bit scared of Hermione, because especially during the first, on the train journey there, she's helping him find his toad, and so he thinks, oh, she's a nice, sensible person, she'll sort of look after me, kind of thing. And you get the sense of kind of like a slightly older sister looking after a younger brother at first, but then she does the full body bind curse on him later on, And it wouldn't surprise me if he was a little bit concerned, because that does kind of, to a certain extent, I think that would remind him a little bit of his grandma, which is it's one of the reasons why I've never quite understood the Neville and Hermione ship, because I've always thought it's a little bit kind of reminds me a little bit too much of how Neville was treated by his grandma to a certain extent. So yeah, I honestly would not be surprised if that was the case. However, I also think it would be the case that Neville probably had a crush on Ron. So there we go. I think come on, everyone has a crush on Ron.
Let me just say here, with regards to what you just said, you think that everyone has a crush on Ron. And for some of your reasons, I'm sure we'll get into discussion at some point about this in the future. Some of your reasons are just like, how did you even get this? But I won't get into that now. We've had many conversations.
We won't get into shit and stuff. Yeah, but yeah, that's just what I think about, sort of how Neville is a little bit scared of Hermione towards the end of first year. So.
Okay, but going back to the chapter, I love the last sentence and the way it just like the cliffhanger that there was already somebody in there, but it wasn't Snape. It wasn't even Voldemort, and the reader's just like, who else could it have been? Who else? What? And just like that frantic, like mind worrying, trying to think back and be like, who else? Who else could it be? Who's evil? Is somebody else there? It's like a trap. Like, what's going on?
If that was a TV show, they left us there on a cliffhanger and I had to wait a week to see it, I would be so freaking pissed. I hate when TV shows do that. Like I don't know if any of you guys watch The Flash, but they always do that to us. So many episodes, they leave us on this ginormous cliffhanger, and I'm just like, come on, dude. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. All right, well, I think that was an excellent segue to go on to our next chapter, entitled The Man with Two Faces, which is the final chapter, chapter 17. And I really like how they get straight to the point after that cliffhanger. And it just says, "It was Quirrell." "You!" gasped Harry. Quirrell smiled. His face wasn't twitching at all. "Me," he said calmly. "I wondered whether I'd be meeting you here, Mr. Potter." I love how we see another character for who he truly is. So here we are obviously shown Quirrell for who he truly is. You see that he's not stuttering anymore, and he suddenly becomes very eerie and scary. Something that you definitely did not think about when we read about him throughout the whole book. He wasn't scary or anything. He was this, for lack of a better word, pathetic kind of teacher. Not pathetic, but he was kind of I can't, but he was kind of this.
He was pathetic. It's a good word to use.
Yeah.
He was stuttery, and not at all saying that people with stutters are pathetic, but it's just he's just kind of in the background, and there's nothing about him that stood out to you.
I play that up a lot. Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, you see now this, who you once thought was this pathetic man, now become this very eerie, scary character. And I imagine that is definitely very daunting to Harry, and you can see that throughout this whole confrontation.
I'm curious, for any listeners, if you got to read the books before, when they were coming out, or before, if this part wasn't spoiled to you. I'm curious if anyone was expecting Quirrell to be there, to be the one who was with Voldemort. If you did or didn't, please comment, share your opinion. Like I've said many times, we love hearing from you guys. Another thing that I really like is just kind of the demeanor and the way that Voldemort was talking to Harry once Quirrell reveals him. He has this just way of speaking that is just it's I feel like maybe elegant, but in an evil way, or sinister, but with elegance in the tone, the way that he does it. He's not like, oh, I hate you, you will die. It's like, you will do this, blah, 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 you know? You know what I mean? He's like calm and evil. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And that's like an excellent way to introduce what I kind of thought. I kind of like immediately imagined him talking like Scar from The Lion King, that kind of very like smooth, but like bad, kind of sarcastic and like mean voice.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I can definitely see the similarities between Voldemort and Scar now. They're both kind of like manipulative and mean and like
Yeah.
speaking down almost to like
Mm.
both Harry and Simba. But yeah, I thought it was a really interesting the way that Voldemort in the beginning, like I said, was very like hissing, like sibilant and all like calm and quiet. But then the moment that Harry tried to escape, he like instantly snapped to like screaming and yelling at Quirrell and like attack, attack, attack and like screeching. And I think it really does display even from the beginning how like desperate and not entire and like odd Voldemort was, which made some more sense later once you realized how messed up his soul was, literally.
That's an
But
understatement.
yeah, but even from the beginning, there was like that sense of like something is like he switched emotions too much. Like there's an edge of like desperation of something else there. Maybe I'm reading too much into it.
Mengar, I think you've actually raised a good point in regard to sort of the desperation side of things, because when you think about it from Voldemort's perspective, he is in a pretty desperate situation. I mean, he's very, very close to getting the stone. He wants it, and we all know how kind of power hungry Voldemort is. So it does make sense that he would be sort of in a sort of barely controlled desperation because he needs that stone. So I wouldn't say that was particularly much of a stretch, to be honest. It sounds fairly accurate to me. I mean, considering the situation.
Yeah, I'd have to agree as well. Yeah, and then there the Seagulls go.
Yep, they share their opinion. They have an opinion. I feel like we should make the Seagulls an unofficial member of the hosts.
So, like I was saying before, the Seagulls rudely interrupted me. I agree as well. And again, another thing is when like you kind of see Harry showing himself for like kind of who he is as well, and he really like steps up to the plate. He really comes into his own again, and he is truly like very brave. And when he is in these difficult situations, he is actually quite smooth at getting himself like out, or just keeping himself out of trouble. I mean, because like this whole time he's kind of like distracting Professor Quirrell by talking to him so he can delay the inevitable.
I think I agree there. I'm still confused about why Quirrell couldn't touch Harry, honestly. I know Dumbledore explains it. Still kind of confused because, like, Voldemort could touch him in Goblet of Fire. Can one of you explain that if you understand? Because I'm still kind of confused about it.
Yeah, I think Voldemort actually had like a throwaway line in Goblet of Fire where he mentioned this that it was only because Voldemort was brought back with Harry's blood. Spoilers to everyone listening, but only because Voldemort was brought back by Harry's blood that he could touch Harry because he had that part. He had like Lily's protection in his body and his blood now. Lily's protection wasn't like the separation between the two; it was kind of like part of Voldemort as well now. But it was because of Lily's protection, as Dumbledore said, the love that Voldemort and Quirrell couldn't touch Harry.
Oh, I get it. You know what? I love Dumbledore's talk with Harry when Harry's in the hospital. Just the entire thing is just so. I think it's one of my favorite interactions between the two of them. the way that Dumbledore talks to Harry in this kind of this calming voice of like, you know, he's taking care of everything, and then Harry's realizing that he kind of knew everything that was happening. um, and I just, I don't know. I know we don't have many interactions with Dumbledore in this book, but I love the role that he plays in the book.
Yeah, definitely. I 100% agree. I love the way that Dumbledore was not Voldemort. Dumbledore was he was calming. He was like he still his grandfatherly figure, but he also was listening to Harry. He wasn't like just brushing away Harry's concerns and stuff like that. He wasn't just like, "Oh, calm down, like don't be silly" and stuff like that. He kind of like threw in jokes, like, "Harry, please relax, or Madam Pomfrey will have me thrown out." Like it was less of a Harry, you're being hysterical, and more of like a Harry, I'm gonna get thrown out, please lower the volume a little bit. Um, where he was making like jokes about Fred and George. He gave Harry the information that Harry needed, but I think he was also very careful not to like focus as much on the fact that Harry kind of just killed a man and faced Voldemort. He instead was like he was beaming, he was delighted, he was very relaxed and like supportive of Harry, and it was nice.
I like that too. One thing I think I know the answer, but I'm not 100% sure. Was, you know, when Dumbledore, when Harry was asking Dumbledore about Snape, and then Dumbledore said that James saved Snape's life. Was that in the flashbacks in Prisoner of Azkaban when he was trying to catch them or something? When did James save Snape's life?
When did it happen, or when did Harry find out about it?
No, when did we ever learn about what happened there? Because I don't remember that happening.
Basically, James Potter saves Severus Snape's life when Sirius told, basically, sort of half gave it away, that if Snape climbed underneath the Whomping Willow, went along the tunnel, he'd be able to find out why Remus Lupin was sneaking off at night, you know, once a month. James heard about this, ran after Snape, managed to pull him out before he actually got into the Shrieking Shack itself, but Snape did see Remus in his werewolf form at the other end of the tunnel. So
Right,
that's
right.
why. But yeah,
We learned that in Prisoner of Azkaban, right?
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I just couldn't exactly remember it in my head. But yeah, thank you.
No worries.
Oh, yeah, I just want to point another Easter egg for those of us who know the whole series. When Harry asks Dumbledore, why would Voldemort want to kill me in the first place? And Dumbledore says, "I cannot tell you. Not today. Not now. When you're older, when you're ready, you'll know." And we know now is because of the prophecy. So it was an interesting Easter egg, a hint of an Easter egg.
Yeah, and definitely at Erica.
I really like what Harry says about Dumbledore to Ron and Hermione. He says, "He's a funny man, Dumbledore. I think he sort of wanted to give me a chance. I think he knows more or less everything that goes on here. I reckon he had a pretty good idea we were going to try, and instead of stopping us, he just taught us enough to help. I don't think it was an accident he let me find out how the mirror worked. It's almost like he thought I had the right to face Voldemort if I could." I like that statement of just already he's kind of understanding how Dumbledore works. It's just a hint to what the relationship between those two will be like in the future. So I really like what he said there. It summed up Dumbledore's role in the book really well.
I also, adding on from that, actually, I think it's quite interesting that Ron's reaction to a lot of this is just, I always said Dumbledore was off his rocker. I just think that's quite funny. It even says, looking quite impressed at how mad his hero was. I just think that's quite funny. It's quite sort of he's a bit peculiar. Ron knows that Dumbledore's a bit peculiar, and Harry and Hermione both know this as well. And it's kind of he's quite this kind of whimsical headmaster at this point. We find out later on, obviously, it's not quite as simple as that. But at this point in time, he definitely kind of plays into this kind of slightly peculiar. He's a slightly unusual headmaster, kind of jumping around. And yeah, I just thought that was a nice little bit.
Yeah, and also like I think we've all like well maybe not all of us, but I've definitely referred to Harry as like Harry Oblivious Potter. But for like someone oblivious, he's quite insightful here for an 11-year-old about Albus Dumbledore.
When Harry's still in the hospital wing, Hagrid comes to say hi, which first of all was adorable, and the whole interaction between them was hilarious and adorable, and also just like Hagrid's a big softie, but then also Hagrid. I mean, so we know that we talked about this much earlier when we were doing our podcasts, but like in the very beginning, Hedwig was kind of that first present of Harry's that he ever gotten, the one that gave him like company through those like long summer months when he was waiting to go to Hogwarts, and then here Hagrid gives Harry a book, a photo album of his parents. And it's like heart wrenching and amazing and adorable because, like we mentioned before, Harry's never, like, the first time Harry saw his parents was in the Mirror of Erised. He doesn't know his parents. He barely knows what they look like. And now Hagrid is giving us this priceless gift of pictures, hundreds, I don't know hundreds, but many, many pictures of smiling and laughing his parents from like Hogwarts time, and like I can't imagine what that must have felt like to Harry to receive that gift and how much he must have cherished it.
I'm not going to put a downer on this at all, but I just thought it was interesting that Hagrid says that he sent away to Harry's parents' old school friends, and I was thinking that he probably would have gotten an awful lot of these from Remus Lupin, if not all of them, because Remus is probably the only person left alive at that point. Mary McDonald might have been alive, but we never actually find out one way or the other. So it's entirely possible that all of these photos were from Remus Lupin.
Which is a whole other level of heart wrenching.
Yeah, but it's also quite spooky because it's like Remus doesn't have anything else, so he gives Harry these photos because he knows Harry hasn't probably never seen his parents before.
Yeah.
You know, can't remember his parents. So.
Yeah. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I would love, love, love to get like stories from like the Marauders, from like the background characters, like the other Gryffindors and like maybe the other houses and stuff like that. I would love to get like maybe short snippets of like what they've been feeling throughout these like 7 books or even beforehand, because there's so many stories behind there, right? Like, how was Remus feeling this whole time? Were the other like friends of the Potters? What would the other Gryffindors think of the trio? What do the Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws really think of this group? Were most of Slytherins like Malfoy and Crabbe and Goyle? Were they against them? Like, what do the other teachers think? There's so many little stories in this series. I love it.
In Chamber of Secrets, we do learn a bit more about the other houses. Like, we learn more about Hufflepuff when people start getting petrified. There's a quote that I want to give here that Harry thinks to himself at the end. It seems as though life would go back to normal next year, or as normal as it ever was at Hogwarts. Oh, honey. No. Harry, there's all these statements where it's just like, everything's gonna go back to normal. It's okay, but it's like, the next year is even worse. Just gets worse and worse and worse until, like, the end of Deathly Hallows. Not worse, but more just, like, everything that he goes through gets more intense. Which I guess you could say has become the normal for him.
Going back to going forward rather to the end of term feast, I thought it was quite sweet. After Ron gets the 50 points for the chess match, Percy could be her telling the other prefects, my brother, my youngest brother got past McGonagall's giant chess set, and it's like, we don't get that many instances of Ron's siblings straight up saying that they're proud of him. And I think this is actually one of like 3 or 4 instances where this happens. But I just thought that was really sweet because even though Percy is kind of a little bit stuck up and all the rest of it, he's still a Weasley. He still cares about his siblings. I just thought that was really sweet. Just shows that he cares about Ron and is proud of him. I just thought that was really great.
I had completely forgotten about that moment, and I think it shows Percy for who he really is. He cares about his siblings, even though he can be like snobbish and stuck up. And I think that's such like a sweet moment in the book.
That's an interesting thought, and now that you guys mention it, I feel like with Deathly Hallows, Percy's entire character arc was something that wasn't spoiled for me, so I wasn't expecting it. I didn't know anything about it. And I remember, I think I messaged you, HM, and I said I'm totally seeing Percy in a different light. And now that you mentioned that about Percy, I feel like reading these books again will probably make me reevaluate Percy as a person in the books as I go through them. Now that like I know his redemption at the end, so it's a good point. It just Percy's an interesting Weasley. He's not my favorite, but he has one of the best character arcs of the Weasleys, in my opinion. Besides Ron, of course. So we're done Philosopher's Stone, the book, and we're just going to kind of round up our thoughts on Philosopher's Stone. We are going to do, the next episode will be a book to film comparison, but we've always said we separate the films from the books. So we're going to round up Philosopher's Stone as a book, what we all think. Why doesn't our guest go first? So HM, you go.
Okay, well, I think Philosopher's Stone is it's a really good first book. It sets up the story in a really concise way. You understand what the characters are going through, their sort of struggles, all the rest of it. You got Ron's insecurities, got Hermione's feeling like she doesn't really fit in, and that she has to worry about, if she doesn't do well, she'll be thrown out of the Wizarding World. They've kind of got little bits and pieces thrown in there. You've got the sort of the white. You got a little bit of world building, especially with Diagon Alley and Gringotts and all the rest of it. But you've also got some of the Hogwarts stuff. You've got the various different background characters shown in a little way. Nothing major, but you've got enough that it kind of you get a kind of a sketch picture of it in the background, and then the later books kind of build in and color it in and all the rest of it, and it kind of gets bigger and bigger. So I think as a first book, it's really, really good. It's also really, really good as to read to your kids. A bedtime story. It's small chapters, lots of jokes, very, very good. It's a good short. It's a very, very good book just in general. I think in terms of Harry Potter world building, it's definitely what set the sort of the foundation level, and everything else got built on it. It does suffer us with a couple of minor plot holes. But a lot of that could be just down to it's more of a satire on boarding school mysteries kind of thing. But I think as a book on its own, it's a really, really good read. It still holds up really well, even though I've read it 500 times. So yeah, no real major complaints with it at all. I think it's a really good book. It's one of my. The first 3 books are definitely some of my favourite in the series. I really, really like what they do in such a concise manner. They give it very, very clearly. You know what's going on. It's funny, it's cheerful, it's not completely light-hearted, but you get the idea of it. And it just, I honestly couldn't praise this book enough. It's just really good.
So I have to agree. I really enjoy the way this book was written. And going back to what I said at the beginning, I think that this book was written very well, and it introduces us into the world very well.
This book is definitely has a place in my heart because it is the start of one of my favorite series in the entire world, and I have so many fond memories of reading it. It's almost nostalgia I came back from reading it. I can quote half of this book from memory, although I guess it kind of mixes up with the movie, but like this book will hold a special place in my heart forever. um, I completely agree with HM that like there are of course some plot holes and stuff. It's not my favorite book in the series because I feel like the later books were a lot more emotional, a lot more gripping. You got to know the other characters a lot better. When, as I mentioned in this book in our podcast multiple times, I would love to see some more insight into the other characters. But yeah, it was a great start to a series. I guess the biggest problem I have with this book is that the way it's written, it seems like it's aimed more for children, so it's a lot harder for me to get my older friends into this series when this is their first book of it. But yeah, overall, this book is amazing.
Philosopher's Stone is, I mean, you guys have already all said it, but it's a really well written first book of the series. It introduces things, and the ending, I feel like the ending ends really well, mainly because, like I said, we finally get Harry's personality, because this book was a lot of developing Harry's personality, because before that he didn't really have one, because he didn't really have anyone to share his personality with. I really like that part because I feel like it's a lot of Harry discovering who he is and what he wants and what's important to him. So I think this book does that really well, and I think it introduces our golden trio really well and the characters that we do get. I like how it sets a place where, like, with regards to the adult characters, it really sets up the role. I know I said this about the first chapter, but it sets up the role that each of these people will play in Harry's life. When I say the main adults, I think of McGonagall, Snape, Dumbledore, and Hagrid. Those are of all the adults, those are the ones that he interacts with the most, of the teachers. And so I think it did a really good job with that. And I feel like of all the books, though, this was the hardest one for me to get into, but until I got to the end, because like I said, this was the first book, and so I got it from the library, so I had a certain amount of time that I had to read it in, and so it took me a while to actually stick with reading it. But after I finished it, it really stuck, and then it went from there. Just the ending, I really like the ending of this book. And the last 3 or 4 chapters are the part that's really a lot more interesting to me. So I think it's definitely a good book, and I really enjoyed discussing it with you guys. As I mentioned, the next episode will be a book to film comparison for Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the film, which came out in 2001. And then after that, we're going to start Chamber of Secrets, which will be exciting. Chamber of Secrets is a different feel. It's a little darker, but we'll talk about that next time. Please share our podcast with people. Give us a like, subscribe to our channel, comment, let us know your opinions on some of the stuff we discussed. We really want to hear from you guys. You know, we're a newer podcast, and we want to reach as many people as possible. So it really, really does mean a lot to us when you share it with your friends. Thank you so much for listening. Bye, Erica. Bye, everyone. See you next time.
This is Jess. Thank you for listening, everyone. See you guys in the next episode.
This is goodbye from Vega. Thank you so much for listening and staying with us this whole book.
Bye, everybody.